Yeah.
Let's
So
try.
we thought a lot about how to do this panel discussion, because usually it's this Q&A situation, and we really want to avoid this. So we invite everyone to really partake in the discussion. And we thought to kind of like break the ice in the beginning, we try this little round of giving keywords and everyone just talking about what comes to your mind real quick, just to bring some buzzwords that we had during the full day back to our minds. So the first one would be glitch. Does anyone want to? We can also do the order if you want to. So glitch, okay. Martin.
I don't know, because it's also kind of something which I started out with like years and years and years ago, which was kind of, I don't know, like how I kind of got into what I'm doing now was working with computers which I would find on the street, and they would kind of break down and collapse. It was kind of early days and things like this, and it was just all about, kind of this idea of like opening this kind of black box. But then I think it became something which was maybe more of an aesthetic, but it's really, so it's kind of interesting of how you can kind of maintain the glitch, I think, without it becoming something which is just like a style in a way, but really how you can rework the glitch as something which is really about like, or how it could be now when everything is really so smooth. And so even though, as we saw in Rosa's thing, it has become also not smooth again, in a sense, like the more it's saturated, the less smooth that it becomes, the more there are glitches.
Nice.
Well, I think it's part of the system. If there were no glitch, we all wouldn't be here. There would be no evolving, no development, if there isn't the possibility for an error. I mean, from the perspective of DNA and the revolution and the semiconductors, for example, the glitch is part of us.
And I always think, when I think about glitches, is like how it's today used to define the digital media, and it's becoming more and more an aesthetic fetish, more or less. I think it's less the thought of an error. Maybe it will be perceived by some of them, but mostly it's like just putting a brand on the digital media, which I think it's interesting. So it's getting more and more. I think that will be some aesthetic benchmark of our time, basically, which kind of it's kind of disseparated from the function, basically. So it's like the aesthetic and it's the function, and it's, what I'm thinking. It's kind of interesting, and we kind of in our research project try to separate from this idea of glitch, because we kind of having another approach to that. So
yeah, for me it's like not being not at all a digital person, I think, or not about art at least. I always found that this word glitch, it took me a very long time to know what it I knew. I saw, and I found it so sexy, and was maybe one of the, because it sounds like so wet and so something. So I thought it's like it was very nice to hear that it was maybe my first step to realize the digital world is not as clean as it was said today. Like it's not clean, it's not pure. It's like it has a lot of in between things. So this is a very nice, but yeah. So it was my beginning of seeing the dirt in the digital world.
Yeah, and for me it's a little bit like Angelica started.
You can say
So, like this? Yeah. So, actually I'm afraid of it because I don't know really what it is, and I just know that in my conservational work I have to take care not to get too close to it, so I just try to go around.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I think throughout the full day we had different interpretation of what a glitch or an error can be, and it was quite interesting that, as you say already, that some people might interpret this as a loss, as a mistake, as an error, but it was also very nice, I think Thiel mentioned on the presentation at the beginning that glitch is something that actually reveals. So I really like how glitch is something it kind of moves always. It changes, it's fluid. It cannot really be fixed on like a brand or something, but it always will kind of move around. I think yeah, we could maybe double checking. We have many keywords, but I think also another aspect or another keywords that was coming during the whole day, or not in all discussions, but in many presentations, this was the word sustainability, or was the input around sustainability. So maybe some thoughts on rotting sounds and sustainability.
Well, within the project, the sustainability would be is basically represented in a kind of transformation, because this is the only sustainability which will last longer than everything else. But everything else is kind of transforming and evolving or not. And yeah, that's kind of interesting approach to sustainability in this kind of context.
And in my context, or in our context, I would say it's also perhaps immaterial, and I would say documenting and archiving thoughts, strategies, ideas in concerning conservation projects. It's a kind of immaterial sustainability, because we take care about the facts, we collect it and go on working with this, and not always coming back to the beginning. So in this way we also, that's how I understand sustainability in this context for us.
Yeah, for me, after the day of today, it's like the idea that everything is a process, and as well conservation, it becomes a completely new concept for me. It's like conservation is not something static, as I can understand, especially from you both today. It's not something static, it's something moving, which goes against the idea of conserving. And now the S word, how you say, sustainability. It's the same. Like I always, for me, it's not something which we have to keep. It's something we have to live. And I like something. One of my favorite sentences of the day is like, if you close a system, it will start rotten. It says a lot about a lot. For me, it's like I stay with this sentence for my art and spirituality and everything. It's like so it goes with this. Yeah, there is maybe no static thing. Yeah.
You want to just, I don't know whether that's continuing or not, but there's always this idea of what I was thinking today of like how one is choosing what is to be sustained. Like sustainability also implies, like, which I think is what you're saying, like some kind of continuity, whereas rotting somehow implies maybe a change in that continuity, but that can also be like something which is maybe the opposite of rotting, but I don't know, now that's going off something else. So it's like neither sustainability nor rotting, but I mean, you could say that maybe that's like revolution, but that's the wrong kind of word, but something which is not, so it's like not maintaining the status quo, like I'm not talking about conservation, and not going towards like a kind of dissolution or heat death or something like this, but some other process that might possibly be imagined through looking at these terms, I think, that isn't any of those things.
Yeah, well, sustainability in my context is certainly something different. We are preserving a situation and not a progress. Well, on the other hand, when you see sustainability as something in action in the present reveals its value in the future, then probably preserving and describing and documenting our present has a value in the future. So it's both probably to preserve something or to keep something evolving.
I think it was actually you that told me that the Romans, the things that we find of the Romans, like the things that are so they found by the archaeologists, these are the things that have been worthless, right? Because all the things that were of worth, that were sustained, they would be reused and all the things that were worthless, they would be thrown over the city walls as garbage. And these are the things that we find these days, right?
Yeah, it was the Acropolis where in Athens. There's definitely that later. Yeah.
Well, it's just like the idea of the flat what is it called of the piece of the flat archive? So the you were, yeah, flache Abfall is a bit the same, no? Like garbage stays forever, or spurry or something like this. Yeah.
So maybe as the last word for this round, we came up with sharing.
No.
No sharing. Maybe
Well,
also in terms of sharing knowledge. Or
yeah, what comes into my mind here is what I'd like to know if artists who produce something today and they know it will be not available in 50 years, for example, do you feel pity about it? That you can't share it with the future because it will be gone?
Me, not at all. No. The opposite. I found this buste, like this art is ephemeric, ephemer, art éphémère. I don't know how to say. Fantastic. Like, yeah, it's. But maybe I'm too esoterical, but I think the action says much more than, especially in our times. I mean, I'm into recycling, and all what I do is like using the shit which was already before, and I'm. Yeah, maybe it's kind of ready-made art also, but I don't know, and I think it's maybe more preserving what it was already. But I wouldn't be sad if my thing disappears forever. No. No.
But Angelica, may I ask you, how do you have an idea how to share? So now you said you are not sorry when it disappears, but do you have a strategy to share the knowledge about your performance? Do you have the idea that someone else could practice this performance, like an heritage in a...
I don't think so, because I mean my thing is very, very personal, and it's about a lot about my own stories and experiences, and yeah, like kind of autobiographical thing mostly. So I'm not interested. I don't think people should do the same because it makes no sense. But maybe if it inspires somebody to do their own research in whatever sound or cleaning their flat or something, that's the best. That's it. But I wouldn't. I'm bad in documentation, and I like to destroy things and throw them to the garbage. So yeah, burn them or more like this. But no, not. I think it's more in the action, in the ritual, that they become a bit some. If the ritual brings some message is not a nice word, but some energy, which goes on moving. That's enough.
Yeah, but so I could know this because when I remember your technique of working, because you use something with an information, and you use it in several systems. So it's not only the material you take, you also make something else with the material. So that means a transformation of this.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, maybe I'm lying to myself. Maybe I'm more. I like material things. That's true, but I don't mind if they disappear. So I like them in the moment. But I'm not about keeping things. I think. Yeah, getting rid of things is a kind of stress. You know, you get the stress of the sadness of losing, of separating, of saying goodbye. But keeping the things has another stress, and which I find even more dangerous or more heavy. So I prefer to get rid of things. Principle.
I mean, sorry, because perhaps I wasn't clear. I know what you mean, but I meant with share. I try to use the word sharing in a double sense, that you share it inside of the material. You not only have these material you work with, you also make something So it is included in your work.
It has more to
the
do with
practice of sharing.
this. If you talk about the pieces I do with tape, for example, like this how you call this, crochet, and I do these sculptures. And this material which I use has already a lot. Is really recycling. It's a ritual of recycling histories of somebody else, not mine. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't belong to me. And I cannot really share my thing. I mean, it's really like it's kind of a ritual of which passed through me, more or less. I think, yeah, and it stays. It stays. I don't know if I answered that. Sorry.
Now that you talked about recycling, actually, we have a very nice question coming from the audience. Do you want to read it?
Just a second. It's very tiny. So it says, in agriculture/biology, rotting can be seen as an upgrading process from organic waste to compost and fertilizer. So do you consider the input source to a rotting process to be waste that is enhanced through rotting?
Nice question.
Yes. There's nothing to add, actually.
Why yes, why no?
I don't know.
Well, enhance, because we're thinking about applying the term of the patina, which basically fits to like the traditional art and material, and it's like this kind of difference from the so-called original condition, and then everything like space, time, touching people, user interaction, inside the material reaction, everything like making the material bigger, smaller, or adding some context anyway. So that's a kind of completely enhancing of the basic idea or of the basic object, basically. So yes, totally. I think there's the value adding, and I think patina is the best metaphor to give them a name, to put them a label on. So why no?
I just don't really like the term of waste because it always implies that there's something which is like really super productive, and the waste is generated by that super productive process, and then it's something which is that you don't want and that doesn't have any value, that you need to add value. It just seems to be like a whole kind of machinic process that I don't really like so much. That there should be value in all those things, in the waste, and then it's not transformed into value by whatever unseen process that's conducted by unseen actors or laborers or whatever, that it's kind of part. I guess you see this like a whole like economy of like these processes produce waste which is not valuable, but they're valuable, and then out of this waste you produce something which is valuable, but there's always something. Somehow what's interesting is there's always something left over, that's just somehow like brushed under the carpet, and people just ignore this thing, like the waste of the waste. Yeah. Let's say, it's kind of interesting.
So if we then would slightly change the question, for example, just
not use the word waste,
like using remains or residues instead of waste, that would like getting more in your direction, or
I'm not sure. But then waste is still something. It still has meaning in a sense. Like the word has meaning as opposed to residues, which is some. Yeah, I don't know. But that's interesting. Like residues is also interesting in a sense because there was this word which came up a lot, was this thing of like what is outside something. You know what I mean? Today, like I think Rosa was talking about this cuts into things or across things, and then this idea of like the environment and what is kind of external to this environment. So it's kind of like also this. Residue I think is quite interesting, but they all have this kind of value or value judgment in a sense. Not that that's a problem, but this idea of what is like what you discard after you've refined something is kind of interesting, I think.
I also thought what Rosa talks about when she's maybe even talking about waste. She says that, for example, the screens being like they are is also something that has to do with the process, and we're not even questioning it anymore because it was decided somewhen, and it's like it is. but why is it like this? It could also be an octagon or whatever. So this Abfall that I really also like the word, because it's falling from some, or it's filled up.
And actually not in the sense of waste, I just thought more in the sense of left over. Yeah, it's not with the, yeah.
Yeah, at least in Germany or in Austria, the waste centers in the villages are called Wertstoffzentrum.
Wertstoffzentrum. Like something. How you translate this in English?
Wirtschaftshof, sagt man.
Wirtschaftshof.
Wertstoff, something that.
That something is
Center for something of
valuable.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow, cool.
true.
Wow.
But this question was rather than about using elements or tangible structures still, but it was rather about completely decomposing it into its elements, like building with wooden cubes, something, and then destroying it and starting completely from the beginning. So that's more a reset situation. So I understood the question rather than using recognizable elements.
I hope that I can actually. Another nice question from somebody in the audience from today. If culture disappears, how will the stored data be interpreted? Like how to make a language understandable if not known at all? Do we get the question? Is the person still there? But like if culture disappears...
Well, it was someone asking about my keynote about the memory of mankind process, and I answered it to this particular question that there are deciphering tools in the MOM project too, in a form of Pictionaries, so many photos directly labeled with the respective words. In addition, the theoretical volumes of the languages like thesaurus, grammar, and orthography to enable future linguists to decipher our language, how we used it. But this is particular to the Memory of Mankind process project, but I find it interesting anyway, applied to art in general. How do we interpret art in the distance of time?
Yeah, and maybe one of the key questions, at least like for us, or that always comes to mind is maybe the question even, like why are we talking about all of this? Why are we doing all of this? And what is the political impact or the social impact? Or why are you preserving? For whom? And why are you? And maybe you can give us your thoughts on this very question.
Yeah, I think this is because we are humans. We are curious about what was before, about the past, about history, about art history. And not only about our own history. I mean, if the dinosaurs had a technical civilization and they left something comparable to the Memory of Mankind archive, I think we would be very curious to decipher it and to know their thoughts and their visions and about their civilization. So it's because we are curious. I think this is why we think about preserving and think about the problems of not being able to preserve and about the circumstance of rotting.
And I think it's narcissistic too, as well, because we want to just write our own history or just have at least influence how the history is written or better read, so or how the history is read. So yeah, totally. And I think that's the problem why they are so conservative in thinking about how to preserve, because like especially in the museums, and as soon there's an owner and a curator and they all have their thoughts about how to interpret it, and then there's a problem with the closed system, which I completely agree with you. That's one of the most important sentences today, that if it's stayed closed, then it will fall apart. Like then there's the thing, and then there's the object, and there's no interaction or and it's not readable anymore. And and I think that's the reason why I'm doing this, because I want to elaborate on this idea on the whole society. Well, that's on the whole society, not, but firstly in my profession, that they are more open-minded and then just let things go. And yeah, I think it's narcissistic too.
But Martin, may I ask you? So, what do you think about when we're speaking about conservation and keeping in this exact condition, or perhaps not, or perhaps changing a bit, but we have no register, how you said, register shift in our ideology or in our education. We have to keep it in this, or we just now start thinking about trying to be open as the artwork is. But what's about you? As I understood you, in your system, it's more like a recirculation, or there's a change inherent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's interesting.
Isn't it strange for you what we're saying, or what's our plan is?
Maybe here is on the side of preservation, but I don't know where it shifts. Here is on the side of degradation. I don't know. That's not the right word. We'll see how things go. But no, but I think that's the evening. Anyway, enough nonsense. No, I think it's interesting because I also have friends who are conservators, and some friends who I work with kind of quite closely over the years, and I'm interested in how, and they also start to, and I think you're also doing this, is that you start to apply those kind of ideas about shifting and interrogating this notion of preservation or collapse or dissolution or something to the practice of conservation. I think that's more interesting than just saying, just let it all, rot, or that there has to be some kind of preservation, but that you have to somehow apply new imaginaries or new notions to that. For example, this shifting could be applied to conservation. What happens if you suddenly start to bring in new things that were outside that system, or new, I don't know, artist into the work of this art. Obviously it's not something you can just come up with at the spur of the moment, but how that kind of circulation, which isn't just closed, but has different entry points, could work within that field, would be really exciting, I think.
Yeah, definitely. There are artists who use the MOM project as a medium for their art.
What is the MOM process? What process?
This Memory of Mankind project.
Okay.
Sorry,
I'm very bad with the
missed the.
So there was also one question which I wanted to ask you, was whether you're also which you just answered, so I'm not going to but that it would be kind of interesting if you were either artists would come to you, or to actually not so much preserve something of their own making, but to actually really work with that medium as a work itself. Okay, I want to work with the idea of preservation or with these techniques.
Yeah, correct.
And that is kind of what I'm interested in doing, rather than just bringing something. Here's this thing which is to be, embalmed or.
Yeah, there are two different things. The one is the documentation of art, which is one thing, but artists use the eternity in their work, more or less, or use the possibility that something will last very long as part of their work.
Yeah, about this question, again, I go back, why? Because and I had this very nice, for me, very nice example. I think there is a big taboo about rotting, disintegration, and everything. And I remember when first time I lost somebody, somebody very dear to me died. And then it was a very difficult time. And when I knew this person is now under the earth, and I really needed to know how long it takes to disintegrate the body you love. And I looked in books. I wanted to know how much times it takes the worms, how they look like, till when there's going to be bones and all these things. So I realized there's was a bit before the internet, but there was no really information. It was very difficult to get this information about what is happening to a body which is dead and disintegrates and goes, I don't know. And I realized there's a lot of information. Then I calculate a lot of information about a baby being grown. I mean, this you can find every shop. There's no problem. You buy a book and it's all the photos and the information and which size and And about the other thing, and I realized how strong it's this taboo about our own body, which will disintegrate anyway, and we are also super afraid of that somehow. And all the dirt we have, and about dirt and about shit, blood, bad taste, blah, all these things. So that's why it's very nice to, and it's a mission, no? To investigate as well about the most clean things, so that everywhere there is dirt and death, yeah, as well. And this process, which is, I mean, a body which disintegrates as well, at the end never disappears. So that's as well, there is no disappearance as such. No, there is no nothing. Yeah. So that's very nice about this research, I think, for me.
Nice. Any thoughts on that? Or no?
So I think.
Yes. So I was just thinking about Dieter Roth, because I'm not really specialized in this eternity subject. But when I think about everything he's doing, speaking, collecting, documenting, has always something to do with eternity, or not eternity, with Endlichkeit. Also,
ephemeral.
And so, in the end, it's so interesting because the project he left for us, this has a kind of eternity because we have to go on working on this. So in a way, he is, Unsterblichkeit, but also before it was always the topos of, thinking about the death, and so it's interesting, this play with the two times. That's what.
Are there maybe any questions from the audience, or any words that you would like to contribute? Do we still have the microphone?
Just a follow-up of Angelica, what you said. So do you all agree that the rotting process starts after the thing is dead? Or
No, that's true, no?
I don't know.
Probably from the day you're born, you start rotting.
Since I came up with the project, right, I've never thought about death at all. Never. I mean, this whole idea of rotting is actually a very lively thing, and so it's about things changing. It's not so much about death or going away or being sad. It's absolutely not.
No, but
it's about the embracing of something that is changing, and so there is no point where it starts. Really, it's we are kind of visiting the process, right, as an artist. So we can kind of join in and then turn off again. That's how I see that, right?
I didn't. Of course, I'm not talking. This example was for me not to talk about death, but about the process of the body which goes on moving, and which was for me in the process of mourning very important. I really wanted to know, and I realized it. Even if you say it, people will be like, and this is extreme example. You know, you cannot see somebody getting rotten, a human being. Actually, nobody. There is no video of somebody. You know, it's a bit difficult. There is no information about that. It's a big ethic problem, but that's an example, big example, which is for us, as human beings, will be important as much as we know how a baby is being done, what happened to a body which goes in to the other direction. This is, and it's very lively. For me, it's like a way of celebrating life too. So, and saying goodbye.
No, it wasn't meant to be a criticism on what you said. It's just in media or in music, it's kind of the same, right? I mean, if you think of the scores of old composers, I mean, obviously people are afraid that they are lost at some point or they go away, right? Because they are so canonical for what we do here. For example, at this house, right? It's the first, Vienna School of Composers. It's without them, nothing would exist really. So people are afraid of these changes. They are afraid of discovering that things are not as taught, for example, or as meant. There's a school of how to interpret Mozart scores, and if something is interpreted differently, it's a problem. So obviously, I think they have to be reconsidered, right? Revisited, rethought, and this is what I meant with change and with this. We call it rotting sounds, but it was a slogan actually to give it a bit more attention. We could have chosen other terms for the title, but I think it's the perfect title because it's a little controversial. So it draws attention to the whole thing of changing.
I also think it's really for me quite nice to hear today also in your introduction, Thomas, you mentioned about the terminology and how you also are using or taking terms that are per se kind of negatively connotated, and you kind of use them in a positive way, or to show a beautifully, aesthetically beautiful or aesthetically pleasing process or whatnot. So you're taking something that was starting as a negative, or like the people understand as negative, into something that can be understood as positive. And I think somehow you, Angelica, you kind of address one point, which is the taboo, or again, this kind of negative connotation of that can be read on the other way around. So I think for us also this question of what could be the political impact of taking something that started as negative and now we can read as positive. And I think this kind of was going in this direction of us understand possible positive outcome of research like rotting sound in that sense.
And even though in the comparison to, for example, deterioration or decay, like rotting is basically could be understood as quite positive, because when we had discussion like right in the beginning of our project about the title and the terminology of rotting, because rotting is more like, for me, rotting was so biology, so thing putting on the waste, and then it's becoming really good earth, and this is really good earth to grow plants and fruits and vegetables. So it's like really, it's like the best term for being in the cycle and not really being negative or positive. It's like kind of just natural in a special way. So,
you ever thought about the title "Preserving Sounds"? But I mean, because you document you document it all the time, and you observed and make an archive of it. So how you call this? Will it change the title after finishing the project? What you have after the project? Is it another physical situation? How could you describe it?
And there's a nice story by Philip K. Dick. It's called The Preserving Machine. Maybe you know it. It's the preserving machine, and he's building, or the professor in his story is building this machine because he wanted to preserve sound in the like Mozart and all this classical sound, and he thought about how can he actually do this to be the most sustainable format or media. So he built a machine, and he put Mozart in, and then a special bug came out. And so he had like the Mozart bug and the Beethoven beetle, and like just sustainable animals, and then he put all them in the garden and just try to maintain them in a special way, or not really maintain, but just put in the garden, and then he would like, now I preserve the sound of Mozart and Beethoven, and then he kind of left them, and within time they mutated, or just they developed like nature is developing. And then after a couple of it's like kind of timeless, but after a couple of time, he wanted to read out again the music, and then he kind of not really got the original, what you ever want to call original, didn't get the sound out, and then they were completely changed and different, and it's just like this. It's pointing so good, the preserving machine of sound. So that's actually, and it's fitting our project so well. And it's like, yeah, that's what you're having, a closed system, and it's disconnected from the whole society around it, from its whole environment. That's definitely it.
Isn't this actually a nice or a good metaphor for what happened anyways? Like you're talking about Mozart, and what we have today is the score, right? Do we have anything else? And so
a lot of notes read as a text.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Instruments.
And the
Instruments.
Yeah. And tuning. And yeah.
But how would you see this? Is it like still Mozart kind of, or is it a Mozart Beatle? You know what I mean? Like maybe not.
Yeah, musicologists could answer this really.
And there are different.
There are many opinions. From what I learned, the problem is that I mean, you have to have a school of interpretation to really play it, and there are different schools. And I mean, figures like Mozart or other composers, they often didn't care so much about that. Mozart didn't write any dynamics, so basically, there's a lot of freedom to interpret things, right? And other figures like Beethoven, they shifted their technology a lot. I mean, Beethoven had, I think, 10 pianos, and they were all timely developed for him. And these pianos are partly available and partly lost. And they used, for example, additional pedals or whatever of sound that you could not easily recreate without those special instruments. And other, the other composer like Bruckner is also very interesting because he had people, so to say, always as critics, so to say, making him change his symphonies. So whenever he finished a symphony, he would give it to some conductor, and that's not playable, and he would make 5 versions of it. So there is no canonical thing really in the history of music that is this masterpiece, right? I mean, this is what we have to forget simply. There is no original, no masterpiece. There are often many versions, and some have survived and others not. And this is also, I mean, why I didn't think of naming it preserving sounds is exactly this, right? To have to give an opposition. This is a former conservatory. I mean, conserving sounds would have been the title, right? But it's exactly not what is interesting, right? There's so much conservation already that we don't have to really. We should actually think of this, flipping the switch and see what is on the other side.
And I think in addition comes that probably people are differently listening today than 200 or 300 years ago. Probably also smelling differently. So a different sensitivity of the human ear. Because of the noise today, you're probably listening or hearing different than people before.
For sure.
That is maybe also something interesting, like the audience of all that. Almut, I think we talked about it in on an earlier stage, like how hard it is to preserve a feeling or a social state of mind, kind of, or zeitgeist, or however you want to call it. Maybe you could also talk about this a little bit, like the audience.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm referring to?
Not the talk in particular, but since I tried to point out in our little presentation today, it's that audience, the term is quite passive. So I would shift a little bit to like user or creator or receiver, what our receiver is like also passive really, but since we just, you know, we don't know how 200 years ago people or human beings perceived something, so it's like it's not just a passive process, it's always active, you know, like, so it's the interaction between the object and the subject. And this is what I do like about the metaphor from the archive, because like you are basically an active user of it, because you take it out or you just take it and then you're interacting with it, and then you're taking this out of the content which you want to take out. So it's like selective, highly selective. So depending on the day, your mood, your cultural background, you're perceiving the completely identical information completely different. And that's the environment, and that's we have to think about it. And that's the reason why we shouldn't not really call it audience or user, or a user is active, but like not, it's more than a receiver. So I like the idea of the interaction between. So, yeah.
I mean, something as well very nice from today is this using of terms, like as for rotting or decay and all these things, all the different ways and how a word can turn. And this is as well very interesting. Now I'm thinking like, okay, audience is a passive thing. Yeah, I think thinking and feeling and listening is not passive at all somehow. So, but it's it's nice to think about, and as well, I think if you play the same piece 20 times and the same person will come these 20 times and you play exactly the same, will be 20 different, even if you, even CDs, no, you hear a CD and you hear it many times, always in a different, and your ears are different, and your heartbeat is different, and your breathing is different, so it makes, so this very, it's the rotting of the emotions is as well always present, or of the sensations, no, they're moving all the time.
So, do you like repeat your performances, or you just what is your approach with that, or
No, I don't repeat because I'm improviser, so it's quite impossible to repeat. Even, and I don't believe in even when you're playing Mozart. I'm a classic trained musician, so I was playing this, and it's always like it's impossible to repeat. There's even very, very machinal players cannot do this. It's always different. It's always a glitch, no? Like it's always something there. So it's impossible. But I mean, for me, it's even it shouldn't be. It's always different. Yeah. But what I mean is, like, even if I will play, let's say the piece we played yesterday. I mean, it was quite a similar. It's a very strong structure, very clear. I mean, you could play this many times, and for the same person, you know, Thomas sits and we play it 20 times, and will be always different for him, for us, yeah. So.
And Angelica, during the performance, what is the role of the auditorium for you? Because it's you don't know before. But does it play a role?
I'm not so much in this kind of thing. I think it's very egocentric, because we are having a lot of fun with these machines, and we are having fun if you like to see us playing ping pong, you know. It was really very fascinating, and we're very concentrated in the sound and enjoying this place. I mean, it sounds fantastic here. So it was actually, very egocentric and very narcissistic. But other pieces, when I do more performances or these altars, or you know, or doing more performative things, yes, it's very important how people are. Yeah.
How about you, Martin?
The auditorium. Yep, quite possibly. Like, I enjoy the sound very much, but the space I'm not so aware of. Like, I'm really just within this kind of obsessive world of what it is that I'm doing and listening at the same time. So you're more like, I don't know, that the sound is kind of coming through, but I'm not really aware of anything around me apart from like how to manipulate these shift registers in that case, or whatever is like, I don't know, like I'd like to kind of create something where it's like almost like this is software or this is code, but it's like a very physical, you know, you're kind of bumping these pieces of code around, but it just takes, yeah, you're more focused on this than on the actual space. But in the same case, like if I was doing something which was more, well, in the space, it would be more, you know, that was involving more smoke or more than the space is something important.
So maybe one last chance for you guys. Any more thoughts?
I was thinking about this repetition of things. I just walk a little bit slower, so there's a chance. I was thinking about this repetition and repeating to play pieces, and thinking about Mozart and also what you said about this. And I think it is, because it is always a different thing, it somehow starts to become more of a question of relevance to the audience or to the people that are actually listening or practicing it. And when I think about relevance and repetition, then I'm thinking about rituals, for example, and like establishing rituals, which is also a way of archival, right? Like you can, by somehow inducing a ritual into the culture that you're living in, you're kind of archiving knowledge or experience, and it is less rigid maybe because there's this malleability of like carrying over the ritual and the goals or the rules of the ritual somehow. And just wanted to somehow give this in, because this is something that is very kind of more human-centric and less technology-centered, which...
The repetition.
The ritual, the establishing of the ritual.
Yeah, repetition and ritual is completely human, and I mean, machine tries to, but repetition, it should be I think the magic of a ritual is like this slight difference, which always happens, because if you have a mechanical loop, well, it reminds us well the ritual. Like when we hear these loops, it's kind of a ritual to destroy them and everything. So I think it's sometimes some people say, like, how can you hear, like, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I thought about this, like, it's like, there's a right to criticize playing Mozart, you know, why to play Mozart again? Wow, another CD with Mozart new edition, blah, blah. But I think it has to do with that we need this kind of place of ritual, and to think that it can be always be renewed, that we always have the chance to examine things. Yeah.
And it is kind of defining our culture.
Yeah.
Almost, right?
Yeah.
Like you have this kind of base that is now this like 400-something years old, and it wasn't when it was created, but now it is such a deep thing in us that I'm not listening to it anymore.
I mean, the problem is, like, a lot of money goes there and should go somewhere else. That's another problem. But I mean, I think it's very valuable to still play piano sonatas of whomever, you know. I mean, not forget.
It's important to question that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Funny that we're talking about Mozart. Yeah, I like
Heritage. Is there any other question from the audience? No? Then maybe we can have one last question from our side. It was quite interesting what you add just shortly before, Thomas. You said that with these rotting sounds, you really see like artists kind of jumping in, looking at the process and kind of jumping out, so kind of being observing rather than actively touching somehow or intervening, or I'm not sure if that's how you meant it exactly.
I should add that even as a composer, I rather listen than destroy the situation with my own sounds. That happens very often. I'm often puzzled by the beauty of an environment so much that I don't dare to add something. And this is the same here. the beauty of things changing is something that one can kind of, just enjoy. And I think this research project is also mostly about of thinking of that fact, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we of course add then something, or we create situations. It's actually, I would think of it more as creating situations that that then have a freedom to develop, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just before I told to Therese Kaufmann what was the most beautiful situation with this auditorium, and it was actually when I revisited it after 3 weeks of lockdown. I came to the door and the spider webs were all over. And I then opened the door and I could hear the sounds that were inside all the time, right? I mean, they were there without me or without anyone and alone by themselves. And this was a beautiful situation when I revisited it after a long time.
Yeah, this is really interesting because somehow I was thinking about what you said, and now even more in depth described, and what you, Almut, said about what the rotting sound research for you also is about. Learning this rotting process and studying it and kind of providing a tool for society to understand it, but also maybe use it in a conscious way. So we were interested just to finalize this rotting sounds day. So should we, for the panelists, of course, should we embrace rotting processes? I mean, some of you will be biased. Or should we try to somehow fix this, or kind of contain the transformation, or should we embrace the transformation?
Just very short. I think whatever decision you do, it's okay because it will go on rotting anyway. Because if you close it, I mean, you can be so naive and think you can do something besides observing it, but it will go on,
And so spontaneously, I would say, and also following to what Thomas say and what the miracle was, I think it's, no, perhaps it would not, I think it's the time, the durance, this, that we know it was there all the time and it's going on. I think that is really very essential point for this project. And rotting points this exactly in a positive connotation, I would say. So for me, it's the ongoing process, which is so, attractive on this project.
Yeah, as you said, it will rotten anyway. So even if you choose to preserve it, it's just a matter of time that it decays sooner or later. I mean, even the Mont archive will sometime.
You think so?
Well, after
you told us something else this morning.
After millions of years, when it erodes and wind erosion will destroy. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So it's just a question of time, and for me, the image is you as rotten. You're passing through time, and you meet. Let's say you're going with the car in a highway, and you see something, building passing by, and then it appears and then it disappears. It's like we are traveling through time, and there is some piece of sound of music, and it disappears again as we are passing through time. It's just a question how fast we're passing through time.
And I found if you get the decision of preserving and trying to stop, that's super interesting, because it's like it's a bit crazy, unnatural. It is as well quite cool. No, might not work, but it's nice.
You have to freeze time.
Yeah.
But preserving doesn't mean to stop it.
Yes, it's a question about nibbling. It's like finding the balance between. I completely love to embrace the rotting processes, but sometimes depends on my position somewhere. So I'm not going into a museum or a collector and say, it's okay if it's done. Just accept it. So especially you, even though you in your mom project, you accepted that it will be gone in hopefully just 1,000 years, but you're not embracing it in this special kind, or I mean, you're completely fighting against it.
Well, I'm embracing the decay in a way that we are preserving the documentation. We can't preserve originals, so we are definitely embracing the decay and destruction, because we can't preserve objects or the originals. It's only a photo or a description or documentation.
But you preserving Wikipedia, just some time slot as well. You know, it's just
it's a snapshot.
Yeah, it's a snapshot, kind of. So you're.
Yes. Yeah. But when you know it's a snapshot, you know that in the next moment it's different, and the next moment again, and so on.
Because you don't have the material.
Well, you need to preserve, when you're talking about Wikipedia, you would need to preserve the internet to preserve Wikipedia, because it's something changing and fluid and interconnected and so on. So if you preserve a snapshot of Wikipedia, it's the snapshot of Wikipedia from a particular year on a particular date, and on the next day it's different. But that's in concern of the Memory of Mankind project. It's just we would not preserve Wikipedia as a source for knowledge. It's just as a documentation how we perceive knowledge. In the same way as you would look into an encyclopedia from the 19th century, not to look for something, but to see how the people then perceived knowledge.
And that's one last question to you, because you mentioned you're kind of right now trying to actively contact institutions or museums or private persons to get a kind of more widespread, like a representative kind of knowledge you want to preserve, kind of. So how do you do that actually? So how do you choose, or is it, you know what I mean? Like, you have to kind of define the representation of our time and culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not me who selecting. There's different mechanisms. So institutions use it as a medium, and they choose. Universities choose themselves what to put in, or as awards for best dissertations, or especially the text contributions, which are free worldwide. They're free, but you have to answer the question why you think this text is worth to be preserved, which is stored together with the text. And people who are thinking about the future, they select what they want to be preserved. So it's a special kind of people who do this. And I don't select them, they find the project and use it.
Yeah, but you have like but you're having just this limited universities and institutions. I mean, not the objects inside the institution. I mean, the institutions all in all. You know, like having just the medicine university, the main university, and but no music university, for example. You know what I mean? So it's like this is like highly selective.
At the moment, yes. Yeah. So that's the intention is to have it really a worldwide project. Yeah.
So you're connecting or randomly or just trying to get
connecting,
okay.
Yes.